Why Spiritual Intelligence is Essential to Mature Leadership by Cindy Wigglesworth. The life conditions and problems we face as a species, as countries, as organizations, and as individuals demand increasing, complex/elegant solutions. The type of mature leader who can respond to such situations is a Tier 2 leader, embodying an advanced stage of personal development. These high levels of adult development are inseparably linked to spiritual intelligence. Thus, mature leadership requires spiritual intelligence development. The result is a leader who has, from the inside out, who she is how she leads. And to realize the value of spiritually intelligent leadership, we need to first understand the following. Number one, what life conditions do we face now as humans? What do we need leaders to be able to deal with? Number two, multiple intelligences. What they are, and specifically, what is spiritual intelligence? Number three, stages of adult development and their relationship with leadership. Number four, stages of adult development and their relationship to spiritual intelligence. Life conditions. Our life conditions on Earth today are amazingly complex and stressful. The demand for oil and other fossil fuels is rising as India, China, and other countries industrialize and become high-growth, high-consumption economies. Competition for energy resources increases tensions in the Middle East. Other oil-supplying countries like Venezuela and Nigeria become larger political players than they would be otherwise. Thus, energy, economics, and politics are tightly linked, and tensions are magnified. The U.S. has been a dominant world power since World War II. Its economic power has led to U.S. tastes from food to fashion, permeating even remote and poor parts of the world. This creates a feeling of being taken over by everything American. It adds more irritation to the mix. A greater sense of threat is felt by other cultures and other value structures, perceiving that they are under attack by Western values. There is continuous contact with many different cultures thanks to travel, television, internet, and other media that create the opportunity for exposure to foreign ideas, and the result is a lot of irritation and even outright aggression toward the people carrying the toxic ideas. Polarization of the viewpoints has increased in U.S. and global politics. Filters preventing people hearing each other have strengthened, along with the feeling of threat that these other ideas are toxic. Climate change is creating disruptions of old patterns and will eventually cause migrations of people away from rising water levels, away from areas no longer having acceptable weather patterns, ergo drought-ridden, or to safer or cooler climates. The opportunity for conflict will be enormous as survival fears are triggered. Other ecosystem changes create more pressure as fishing stocks are depleted in some farmland. These have been degraded by poor farming practices. Poverty, political instability, civil wars, and dictatorships or theocracies in some countries create hotbeds of disease, ergo some parts of Africa. Devastating genocides and readiness to go to war, like Iran and Korea. There are more stages of development simultaneously existing on the planet than ever before. In spiral dynamics language, we have cultures at center of gravity: purple, red, blue, orange, and green, interacting with each other and finding each other's value systems appalling. See Table 4 in Spiral Dynamics by Don Beck and Chris Cohen for more information. Even within the developed world, An organization has to deal with employees who are at various stages of development. Red, blue, orange, green, and perhaps a few at yellow. This makes being a leader and communicating to all levels incredibly difficult. Secular scientific orange worldviews have tended to reject spirituality from green and traditional religion from blue and purple, with the result that those who consider themselves spiritual or religious are pushing back against cold capitalism and insensitive science and medicine. In some cases, the sense of blue alienation is leading to increasing demand for religious government, like in Iran, or for war against the secular orange world. People will generally only be led by people at their same level of development, or just a half stage above them, or by someone who can speak effectively to their stage, unless they are forced to comply by brute force or other coercion. These life conditions mean that opportunities will be present for civilization to regress to survival modes and warfare, or we can transcend and find new ways of sharing one planet and ecosystem. Older forms of leadership, such as command and control, hierarchies and bureaucracies, and even strategic global networks like corporations, are limited in their effectiveness and will therefore not be the mechanism of transcending to a new way. A new form of complex life conditions demands a more complex and more elegantly simple form of leadership. This new form of mature leadership will utilize the older forms of leadership, such as command and control, when appropriate. Mature leadership is flexible and utilizes all the previous tools of leadership, but mature leadership adds something older forms of leadership do not have. Leaders who continue to utilize the old forms of leadership will continue to have a role to play, but will not be able to deal with the new life conditions on their own. Multiple intelligences. When people talk about multiple intelligences, they usually mention physical, cognitive, emotional, moral, spiritual, and possibly musical or spatial relations as separate lines. Ultimately, how many lines are needed for the discussion depends upon the topic of interest. For leadership, the intelligences we deal with the most are the physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual lines. I would include the moral line as a subset of emotional and spiritual intelligences. Physical intelligences, PQ, is body skills. A newborn infant has little PQ as it struggles to focus its eyes, lift its head, and so on. Most of us are of average development on the PQ line. An Olympic athlete would have highly developed physical intelligence, as would a dancer or martial arts expert. IQ, or intelligence quotient, is the nickname for the cognitive line. This typically includes mathematical and linguistic intelligences. IQ in US and some other Western societies is heavily emphasized, often to the exclusion of EQ and SQ. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, includes relationship skills. Moral intelligence is the process a person uses to determine right from wrong. At the lowest level, anything I want is right. At the higher level, people learn to follow rules about what is right and what is wrong. The Judeo-Christian 10 Commandments, for example. At the highest levels, people develop the ability to think through complex moral situations by looking at and caring about all the viewpoints of all the people involved and the short-term and long-term implications of a moral choice. Spiritual intelligence is defined differently by different sources, so getting clear on what this means is important.